Thank you. So you've just taken office, as you said, as the new minister. What was that like? How have the first days been? Do you even have an own office?
Well, we do have an office where I also work, and we also have Wi-Fi.
But
there's no but. It's getting better. No, we also have a lot of people there. And last week we welcomed 500 new colleagues in a big room, all motivated, and they will over time come into the new ministry. But the vibe of the place was very, very positive. And the first question I asked the team on the phone, when I didn't know if there are any people, how many people will we have? The answer was, on the first day, like 40, 50. And I asked, are we able to get things done? And the answer was yes. But to be honest, it feels a bit like a startup, and it's also a bit wild.
So you worked in big corporates for many years. What surprised you the most when you walked into the new ministry?
The thing that surprised me most is the discrepancy between what you sometimes read, what people say about people in public service. The skill, the quality of people, and the intrinsic motivation is second to none. That is something money can't buy. That was the first thing I noticed, and everyone I have met is in general deeply committed to the mission. The other thing that I noticed is that the word implementation, the word doing, getting things done hasn't come across that frequently. And I think this is where we have to combine the will with how do we get things done in a system, let's be clear, has become very complex over the many decades. And that's the thing I think that we will have to work on, getting things done.
How do you actually build a ministry from the ground up? What does this process look like?
Well, first of all, we are getting all the different resources and which are distributed today among 7 different places. So
exactly.
we are bring them together under one roof with different cultures. What I was told when they are coming from different places. So we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot of expertise, but it's a bit scattered. And now the job is to bring that under one roof and make sure we work together as a team. And that's also one of the things that I think is important. We ask ourselves, apart from creating an org chart with boxes, what's going to be different? So if you expect a different outcome, you have to also choose a different approach. And that's something we are working every week with the team on, and that will be a bit of try and error. But I'm very positive and hopeful.
Let's look into this future. If your first term was a success, how will Germany have changed in the next 4 years?
Right. I think I know the expectation is super high, and I do not want to start with what we can't do. But let me be clear, the word digitization is a suitcase term that you could put anything into it. So we first have to say, what actually are we talking about, the different areas? The first one I would say is the infrastructure rollout. How can we accelerate here? And I would expect, and I think that's a fair request, in 4 years, will we have taken a big step forward, and will people say that this time it takes to build fixed lines, fiber, that it takes to build 5G, at some point 6G is on the line, is that going to accelerate? And hopefully very soon we will also talk about an important legislation that we will get through, hopefully very soon. That's one part. The other part is, I think, digitalization happens also in the country. In 4 years from now, we can see 5 times many startups with digital models. We have already many unicorns, but I think a lot of the innovation has to also come from the new startups, especially in the digital models. And I think my question will be, what do you need to use data? What do you need as support to create that this environment? And of course, also the small, medium enterprises, what do they need to digitize their business? And then
any idea what the answers could look like?
Well, I think the clarity on regulation, AI regulation, it comes with a lot of uncertainty. And the answer can't be that you have to spend as a small company 200,000 euros to create some certificate that things are safe. The only way to master technology and also AI is actually when you master the technology. You can't a priori exclude certain risks. Think about the LLMs last year when they were hallucinating, etc. All those things have become so much better. So the answer lies within, and we have to make sure that the technology is in the right hands of people, young people with the right values, so they can do that. So we have to give a bit more freedom and a bit more risk-taking. We have to take risks seriously, absolutely. But the question is, what is the best answer to risk? That's one big thing which I think stands in the way. And finally, clearly, there is a high expectation that citizens have a right to also enjoy digital services when they come to the public sector. And that is something I'm thinking a lot about with the team, how we can accelerate that. There is a lot of great things actually in the pipeline. How can we accelerate that? For that, I will need the states, the municipalities, and that has to work in collaboration. But equally, if we are prepared to have a one-stop shop solution like other countries have. So I had a conversation last week with the UAE. If you look at what they have built, if I look at other countries, what they have built, oh boy, that's great. In order to get this, then I think we also have to talk about a different structure. That said, first we have to accelerate what we already have in the pipeline, and that will be also our job to accelerate.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the next steps in that field? Because it's all about to modernize the state, and I would like to understand what the first things be that people will actually feel in their everyday life that changed.
Well, in the coalition agreement, there is a longer list of recommendations or agreements what we ought to do. And that is something we're working through at the moment. How quickly can we implement it? What does it take? There are things like unnecessary reporting for companies. Potentially these supply chain legislation, which is overly complex. There are things that we need to work through. How long does it take to found a company? So there's a longer list of things that we have to work through step by step by step. And the way I look at it, can we cluster those in two dimensions? One is, what's the impact and what's the complexity to get the job done? But we've agreed, let's really talk about it when we are ready to say we will bring it home. And that's something, the work that's already underway.
What do you think, in what fields will people actually feel the difference very soon? I mean, some things will take years, I guess. So,
well, so I think the first thing that people will notice, and that's something that I really struggle with, the sentiment and the narrative about our country and about Europe and the potential of this country is too negative. So we have to change that. We have amazing small companies. We have an incredibly strong university sector. We have research institutes. We have all of that. Think about what's happening here in Heilbronn. This is a real big thing. So when we change the narrative, we give young people, other people more courage to do this, it will change the sentiment. Perception of where we are is first and foremost a question of mindset. We can look at the same thing, but see different things. And I think we also have to be able to be a bit more positive in the sense of we are in command to create things. That's one thing. The second one is when we actually do what we say and we get some laws through the door that also simplify the world, and hopefully then people and our citizens will say, oh, maybe it can be done. And of course, on the side of municipalities, the states, and the federal side, we also have to. And there are some really good things happening when it comes to digitization. We also have to talk about it. We have to improve it, And I'm personally, by the way, very, very encouraged by what I have seen from the teams developing it by the digital wallet. Because there is also a true ecosystem around that, especially around payment systems. And that gives me a lot of hope that when we bring that through the door, we can get the job done.
Can you talk a little bit about the timeline here for the wallet and also for the EID that you mentioned before?
Well, the wallet is supposed to go live, say, end of 2026. But there's an important thing to remember. In digital, you do not just launch a product and it's there and it's perfect. It's the beginning of a release by release by release process. So I said to the team, we have to work on the go-to-market because we have the first chapter, then the second chapter, and we have to grow the wallet. It just doesn't happen on day one and then it's either perfect or it's not there. No, this is going to be a process. So end of 2026, beginning of 2027, that's the real timeline. We also align with Europe because we want to make this interoperable. That means we can travel into other European countries and it's still working. And we have super good people on this topic, and I will also personally be a bit closer to this one.
So what is the vision here, that I don't need a wallet anymore?
Well, first of all, it's like I can identify myself on a daily basis with my ID card, with my driving license, with all the things that I carry in my physical wallet, electronically. I have maybe all my certificates, university degrees, or what I learned as a tradesman, etc. All the certificates in there, and that will grow over time. And if you look at other countries, everything we do is in there, and it of course has to be secure and safe. That's of course a prerequisite. And the other thing is that on top of that, we have the chance to create. We also do business with it, like doing payments in a supermarket or a loyalty program of a retailer, and say we use that one. So it's a question of imagination. And imagine we can use the wallet as a starting point to think of 450 million people in Europe. That is a really, really big market. So I think this wallet is much, much more than just we launch an app. And it's, by the way, not just an app that is built by the federal government. Also private companies, it's a standard that's created and that will be also used by many companies, and that can actually boost some growth. And
there was another huge project with a big idea. It was called the digital patient file. It took decades and now it's here and nobody's really happy. So what can we learn from that example?
Well, what I learned from that example, that the timeline for this, what I've just said, is basically, what is it now, 25? It's 1.5 years from now. And things are progressing, I would say, from what I've seen. I should take that with a pinch of salt, but very, very positive. So that's a foreseeable timeline. And very important is that we launch it in stages. We must not overpromise. It can't do everything on day one. But what is important to me is that we find many applications that actually create a lot of volume and that scale, because when you have apps, you need the stickiness for customers. So that is the idea. And we have to reduce complexity. And what I like is that we start from standards, and we also invite for competition to build that, because I'm not convinced that always the public sector is the best developer.
You talked about, and this is obviously the big topic of this conference, about technological sovereignty. What does that actually mean for you? You gave us some numbers, but what would a sovereign Europe actually look like? Does it have its own cloud infrastructure, its own LLMs, its own Word program?
Well, I personally think there are different aspects. Think of data centers. We need to operate at scale our own data centers in a safe and secure way. Of course, you can always ask how deep the value chain do you go. When it goes to chip manufacturing, of course, that will take much. It's a much different question. But there's so much more we can do. Think about what is being developed here in Heilbronn and in other places. 65% of the public cloud infrastructure goes to 3 other players. What if we now say, hey, Europe, Where's your solution? Here's a big customer. Can we do that together with the right mindset? Why should we not participate? We have everything here. And to be clear, we have sometimes the tendency, let's take LLMs, we sometimes have the tendency, that's all, that train left the station, we can't catch up. If there's one thing we should have learned from China is the LLMs that they are building at the moment, they are a factor 20, 25 more efficient in their use. And that doesn't cost billions to build. So that's something we could build as well. So why should we stop in any of that kind of base applications infrastructure? I think we should go all into all of that.
China is a good point, because the reason why China is so successful in that field is because they have a tech strategy that made AI a priority. Does Germany need a dedicated tech strategy?
I absolutely think that, as we talked about the AI Act, now we have to implement it in Germany, and we have to implement it in a way that I would still say is as pragmatic as it can be by the law. Secondly, I also think that we have to be much bolder in our ambition, also on a European level, to enable tech. But the key thing is, everyone talks about strategy. The most important factor in the progress is time. Time is the most important currency. The question is not just having a strategy. What's our strategy to accelerate so it doesn't take that long? Because think of 1 year. 1 year in today's development is ages. Think about how much just the AI side has progressed in the last 1.5 years. So I think one of the first and foremost principles should be, how much can we accelerate? I know this is easy to say, because the system is complex, yet we still have to find the answer to that question.
But a strategy would define in which field you have to progress fast, right?
Absolutely. I personally believe
we should have a strategy.
Well, definitely we need a strategy. We always need a plan, but when you have a plan, you need to execute. And I hear very often, we should, we could. Yes, but we must do, and we need to execute. I think that is the biggest thing that we need to get right. Once we have that, we have all the talents, all the resources, I think, in the country to be successful. I believe that.
One step to the sovereignty, and this is an idea from the European Union, are AI gigafactories. The coalition has set the goal of bringing at least one gigafactory to Germany. Can you give us an update on where things currently stand?
Well, this is something that is in the process, and I personally have to say there are still open questions.
Which is?
Well, open questions where, when exactly, etc. So, and I think
I'm sure there are some people in the room that would
first we need
have
to have
ideas.
These. First, I'm sure we have, and I think it's important that we also, as a new government, first try to get the homework done before everyone speculates, adds another thing, because it's just in my view, unhelpful for the conversation. So, but it's in train and it's in progress.
Okay, but thinking of what role the EU has to play in this whole game, what would be thinking of strategy, thinking of priorities, what should be the work that has been done in Brussels?
In Brussels, I mean, I agreed with my French colleague, and we will meet again beginning of June with all the different digital representatives in Europe, and we will clearly set the agenda. I'm sure that data usage, privacy topics, AI Act will be on this agenda. We will talk about how can we accelerate and expedite the discussion around companies that can build cloud infrastructure. Where do we have startups, and how we grow startups faster across Europe to move forward? So we have a clear agenda, and I'm sure we will have, from all the conversations I've had so far, I sense a urgent need to get things moving.
Everybody talk about wake-up calls. Some people in the last couple of hours were talking about momentum Europe has right now. Do you think there's something like a momentum and a new will to work together? And also, do you think Europe would be able to become actually the third tech superpower next to China and the United States?
Well, first of all, I think if you look at the world for quite some time, when I can't think of another moment when to really wake up. So it's really time to wake up. The second part is, the question is, how do we get moving faster together? And let's not forget one thing. We are based on values and principles in Europe, and that is a very important asset in this world. And I think there are a lot of people out there who will look at Europe and want us to succeed in that, because we carry the beacon of, say, freedom, values, etc. So developing tech on the basis of those principles is extremely powerful. And that's why I think it's not just wanting it, I think it's even needed from a global perspective that we do this together.
And which are the fields Europe has to collaborate in? Which are the fields Europe has to collaborate in?
Well, I think first we need to make sure that the regulation finds the right balance between security and speed. That's probably a bit longer process. Nevertheless, there are things also short-term I guess we can do. Data usage is one thing. But then I believe we also have to allow the economy, the people, the individuals, the creativity of humans to get things done. I don't think that the state is the best developer of all those things. No, we have to create the environment that we unleash more momentum. And if I've learned one thing in my previous life, even when you think it's very tough, let's not underestimate when you have a target picture, when you have people believing in it, what this creative power can unleash. And the beauty of that technology that we're talking about is super fast. So there is no reason why we can't do that. And I hope that we get united in Europe, also in the spirit of getting things done more quickly.
I have two questions before we come to an end. You've said for founders working with data and AI, Germany should be the first choice. That's a bold goal. So how do you plan to make it reality?
Well, first we have super talents in top universities, great institutions, research institutes, that a lot of people are envious of what we have. We have many hubs. One big strength in Germany is we not just have one center, we have many centers. So we have all these great talents here. We see a growing demand also from people abroad coming to us. Now someone has to explain to me, if you have the great education, it's much better than what people think. When you have great institutions, if we have all of that, what is then the next step to make sure they found a company and they found an ecosystem? For that, of course, you need private investment, not just in the early seed phase, also when you reach a certain size that you stay here. But look at Munich, look at other hubs here in Baden-Württemberg, etc., or North Rhine-Westphalia. We have to get the transfer right. We have to work on that, but the prerequisite of actually having the talents in place is already there. So I would say that's a necessary step, and we should use that step.
Coming back to the beginning, is there anything you miss from your old job?
Right now?
Yes.
Didn't have time to think about it, no.
Karsten Wildberger, thank you so much.
Thank you.